Hey everyone, this is Max at MaxCTCG. Thanks for joining me in another video. So in this video, we're going over the Fiendsmith archetype and looking at the combos. We talked about the cards when they were revealed, and I want to kind of show some of the basic combos and some deck ideas for what you can maybe combine this with. And I do really think that this deck's more of a engine really than a deck. But there are some other decks that you can combine with it that are light fiends that work with it. But I do think we're going to kind of see it played more as an engine. So I'm going to show why this deck as an engine could be really helpful for some different strategies. So the first one we're going to look at is a 1-card combo Anti-Nibiru. This will be really good for any deck that needs this, especially since it does not take up your normal summon. Right, so we'll start off with Fiendsmith. And we're going to discard that. That's going to get us our Sanctus. And Sanctus lets us get a token onto the field, which go into our link 1. And there is no restriction outside of the fact that you can't attack with monsters outside of Fiends this turn. We'll go into the link 1, tribute the link 1, that will special summon another Fiendsmith rep deck, which is important, so that way we can use the one Engrave to get 2 level 6s on the field. We'll use the Fiendsmith effect Engrave to recycle the link 1 back, and then get our second Fiendsmith out of the grave onto the field. That'll give us our 2 level 6s, and then from here we can go into Ceasar. So from here, you did not use your normal summon, you have a Ceasar on field. This is really good for any deck that needs it. Salaman, great. Any deck that has a hard time playing through Ceasar, with 1 card you can easily get to this engine and make plays, which is really good. So another option that I think could be big is Beatrice. This can be really good for decks that want to mill or set up different graveyard interactions. And I could see Beatrice getting banned before the next set releases in our ban list. So, or at least early into the set releasing, depending on when the ban list is released, just due to how generically easy it is to use Beatrice to send cards to the grave. And we're going to show a Mayakashi lock with this. It's going to be very similar. Fiendsmith gets Sanctus, Sanctus gets token. Token goes into the link 1, tribute the link 1, get the Fiendsmith from deck, get the Fiendsmith from grave by cycling back the Fiendsmith link monster. And then we have our Beatrice that we can go into. On our turn, we're going to send transaction Rollback. I'd rather send Rollback than the Mayakashi trap. Just because of the fact that I think Rollback's a little bit better in the grave. But, you can also consider that maybe you get rid of the Mayakashi traps, you don't have the brick in deck, because at least Rollback could do something on field if you draw it. So I guess it depends how you want to look at it, which might be better to get rid of first. I guess it depends if you think you're going to have traps in the grave to potentially copy outside of Rollback. And then we'll go to our opponent's turn, and then in the draw phase, I'm just going to shot turn the Beatrice, send the Mayakashi traps. This is a Ghost Meets Girl, a Masterful Mayakashi Shiranui Saga. And the way Rollback works is it skips the kind of cost activation. So for this one, there's Tribute 1 Mayakashi Shiranui Synchro or Link Monster. Cost and activation requirements can be kind of tricky, but the way this one works is we can just skip the part of needing to tribute the Mayakashi and be able to activate the neither player can special summon monsters from the hand, deck, or extra deck for the rest of this turn. There are certain cards that you can't activate because there is certain activation conditions to be able to use when copying that don't work. It's like cards that say, this card wouldn't work, I think, for example. And I'll try to link to a Tombox video where he goes over some rulings on this, just in case people are interested in that. So what we can do is then use Rollback, take half our life points, and just go ahead and activate the Mayakashi trap, and that pretty much just makes it we're skipping our opponent's turn. And we're skipping our opponent's turn without using our normal summon, so we can do our entire play, skip our opponent's turn, and then pretty much just kill them the next turn, since they won't be able to special monsters from hand, deck, or extra deck. They'll be able to maybe set or normal summon, and that's about it. I think those are some of the more generic ways that you're going to use it, but we can also use the Fiendsmith cards to actually make a negate without using our normal summon as well. So if you want to do this combo for the Fiendsmith play and using their fusion for a negate, you're going to need to be able to play one of the Fabled monsters as a little bit of a brick. Otherwise, you can do this as a 2-card combo, but you're going to be able to need access to 2 light fiends. It's pretty much drawing 2 Fiendsmiths. So we're going to use the Fiendsmith, discard it. Here we're going to get Tractus, and Tractus is worded that you can add a light fiend from deck to your hand, then discard. So you don't actually have to have a card in hand to discard. You can discard the card you add. We'll use Tractus. Tractus will add the Fabled Irae. If this gets discard, special summon, so it's just an easy monster to get onto the field. That will summon itself. It will go into the link 1. The other nice thing is it gives us another fodder for the Fiendsmith for being able to send back to deck. Then we use the Fiendsmith, send that back to the deck, summon out the Fiendsmith. We'll then use the Requiem to be able to get the second Fiendsmith out of our deck. We're going to use the Attractus to actually fusion summon. We'll go into Lacrimosa. Lacrimosa can bring back the Fiendsmith on summon. Then from here we can actually link into Sequentia. Then we're going to use Sequentia's effect. So this lets us fusion summon one monster from our extra deck by shuffling its materials from your graveyard into the deck. And then we can equip both of our monsters to have our negate. Now the one thing, this is a negate the effect of a number of face-up cards on the field to the end of this turn. That's a total link rating of the monsters equipped to this card. So right now we have a link rating of 3. So we can negate up to 3 cards, but they'd all have to be on the field for this to work, and this isn't going to work to negate like an Ibiru, for example. And then for this combo, I'm just going to show the 2-card combo. You just need to be able to fuse with a Light Fiend that you need in your hand. So I'm going to show how that one works. So it could be anything for this, but right now if we're just playing as an engine, I'm just assuming that in this case then it would be drawing 2 Fiendsmiths. So you activate Fiendsmith, get Tractus, adds, discards the Fiendsmiths. Now we have 2 in grave, 1 in hand. We're going to cycle 1 back into the deck. What we're going to do is use Fiendsmith, shuffle 1 back into the deck, summon 1, use that to go into Requiem. And this is important because Requiem can pull from the deck. So that's why we want to put 1 of them back. So now we have 1 in hand, deck, and graveyard. Requiem will tribute itself, summon the Fiendsmith from the deck. Then we can use Tractus in grave, fusion summon with the 1 in hand and the 1 on field. Make Lacrimosa. Lacrimosa brings back the Fiendsmith. We go into Sequentia. The nice thing with this combo is that because of how many cards you have in grave, you could actually use the burn effect with this to inflict the 1200 damage and still have enough for the equips for the negates. We'll shuffle back, get our fusion, equip the Sequentia, and equip the Requiem. So again, that gives you the link 3 negate setup as well. Alright, and then I'm going to show you guys the 1-card combo where you can actually use the burn effect of Lacrimosa with 1 card as well. Your end board's just not as good because you won't have the Requiem to equip. So just show how that one works, because you can technically do burn damage and have the negate. So we use the Fiendsmith, discard that, get Tractus, then can add the Irae, discard the Irae, special summon the Irae, go into the link 1. The link 1 contribute itself, go into the Fiendsmith. And then we can have Fiendsmith shuffle back Irae to summon itself, use Tractus to fuse into Lacrimosa. Lacrimosa can bring back the Fiendsmith. From here we can then link into Sequentia. And then here we can actually trigger the Lacrimosa. It doesn't really matter what we shuffle back here because we're going to need all the targets shuffle back for the Sequentia effect. The Sequentia will shuffle back all the monsters in grave to summon out the Dai's area, and then we can equip the Sequentia to that for the negate. So the main thing we don't have here is the boost that the Requiem gives. What we're going to do is kind of look at some of the cards that we played in the deck as an engine, as well as some other decks that might be able to utilize these cards. So if you want to play the most small engine possible, you could literally just play 3 Fiendsmith and 1 of the Sanctus, and that will let you get to the rank 6. And if you want to have more ways to get to the Fiendsmith to pull off that combo before maybe playing it in your other deck, you can also play more of the Tractus as well. If you want to be able to do some of the Fiendsmith combos with just the 1-card Fiendsmith and a Tractus into the Irae, then you're going to have to play this kind of as a brick. It's not the necessarily worst thing because there are decks that can utilize discards, especially summon this card out as an extra body. But it just kind of depends on what you're looking for out of the deck. The 2 big monsters that we're seeing is kind of Ceasar and Beatrice. Again, we'll have to see maybe if anything happens to these. making this engine a lot less abusable and more focused on the actual Fiendsmith cards. And when it comes to different engines that could work with the deck, we have Muskets and the Fabled. So Magical Muskets and Fabled are both light fiends that can actually utilize more of the cards than outside of just being an engine. For example, the Fiendsmith track disc can search any of your Fabled or Magical Muskets cards, and that's really nice for Magical Muskets because they don't have a lot of ways to get to cast bar. So this gives them more ways to get to that. Also, the Link 1 only requires one light fiend monster, so that works with any of the light fiend Fableds and the light fiend Magical Muskets. But there are ways that you can potentially branch into some of the Fiendsmith lines with just the Magical Muskets into the Requiem. Now, you're not going to be able to go like fully into it because you're going to need 2 level 6s, and you won't have that if you don't start with a Fiendsmith discard. So that's just one thing to keep in mind. But there are potential ways you can kind of branch these decks together, which is nice. I think the issue with the Fabled deck is that not all the Fabled cards are one fiend, some of them are beast. And the other thing is, I think as a deck, the Magical Musket cards actually have some structure and foundation to them. It's pretty good. They are newer than the Fabled cards. I feel like the Fabled cards overall are just worse. So I just feel like in general, you're just going to be really trying to hit more of the Fiendsmith cards with like some Fableds. And when you only get a hand of Fableds, you're probably not going to be able to do very much. And I think that's unfortunate. So that's why I don't really think this version of the deck is that good. I'd much rather play the Magical Musket deck if I'm trying to kind of play the Fiendsmith within another archetype that kind of synergizes with it well. If you are looking for decks that might be able to utilize this engine, I think most will be able to. I think it's very splashable, and no deck's going to not like a High King Ceasar or a Beatrice, or the Negates that these give on the field. But I think decks like Salamangreat could definitely utilize this, since their biggest weakness is always Nibiru. I think we could also see the Chain deck potentially utilize these cards because there's more feed monsters, and that gives them more options. You could also see Labyrinth utilize this, again, more feed monsters that synergize with the deck, either the Unchained version or the regular version, as well as being able to access Beatrice from maybe Rollback if you want to go that route. So I think that could give this deck some nice boost. And then we also have Tearlament. Tearlament can access the Rollback for Needlebug's Nest, or also just sending specific tier cards for fusion. So I think there's some really interesting ways that you can go about using the Fiendsmith engine in different decks. If there's any I missed that you think would be a really good option to include as different decks that the Fiendsmith really work well in, or a deck that needs the Fiendsmith to potentially be more playable, let me know in the comments. These are some of the ones I thought of and I've seen online, and I'm curious if there's any that I'm missing. All right, well, I hope you guys enjoyed the kind of little combo video with these, and kind of discussing what options maybe the deck could look like. Again, I didn't do a full deck layout for these, just because I really do see this more as an engine than a structured deck right now. Well, I look forward to seeing you guys in the next videos, and we're going to have like Drytron, Gimmick Puppet, Trickstar, some of the other ones that we covered the new support for, as well in this week and probably the next week.